The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
Emergency podcast. Sam, you get on a plane to leave Arizona, and immediately the Phoenix Suns make a trade. How you doing?
Never a dull moment, boss. Luckily my flights were not like super long. It was like 3 hours to Chicago and then an hour from there to home. So I didn't go too long without my phone and without Wi-Fi. But yeah, landing in Chicago, I did see that the Suns had traded for Nick Richards. Not a shock, I will be honest. Out of like all the guys we've talked about, I think both of us have literally mentioned Nick Richards last year. We mentioned him several months ago. We mentioned him this season. And of course, his name found its way circulating again in trade rumors just in the past week or two. Just because all along, he's been like one of the only, serviceable centers who makes really not that much money at all, right? So like understanding that the Suns have been in the second apron, there have only been so many trade targets that are like available to them, and this guy, we've had a lot of time to think about Nick Richards. I'll put it that way.
And then banishing Josh Okogie to Charlotte. That's another part of this trade, which we do have to talk about, of course. Let's talk about Josh Okogie later. Let's start with Nick Richards, and let's just really recap how the Suns got here at this point. Because there was a point just a few weeks ago that we were saying the Suns should no longer play minutes without either Josh Okogie or Ryan Dunn on the floor. Nurkic was so bad this season that he was forced to essentially leave the team, no longer playing at all if he's on the bench, and then now, of course, not even traveling with them on their road trip, supposedly because of the flu, but we're at the point where that doesn't really impact what's happening anyway. He would not have played. And now for the second time in a row, our center situation is so bad, the Suns have had to trade a player we like in order to fix the center position, which of course did not work in the past.
Literally on the first day that said player was eligible to be traded, right?
And look, Josh, he signed
important.
a contract.
That's important.
We all said it. At the time, we all said Josh Okogie signed the human trade exception was the nickname that we gave him in the offseason. And look, it happened as soon as they were capable of doing it. But the situation for the Suns at center was so dire that the very first opportunity they had to trade for a player that they thought could improve it, they made that trade. And that trade, of course, is for Nick Richards, 7 foot. 245 is what he's listed at on Basketball Reference. Backup center for one of the worst teams in the NBA.
7'4"
in the Charlotte Hornets.
50-inch vertical. I made that up. Doesn't have a 50-inch vertical. Might feel like it in comparison to what we've been dealing with.
It's crazy, the highlights,
I think we should talk about, a couple angles. First of all, the breaking point to which the fan base has been pushed watching our current center rotation. We watched the Atlanta game together. It was the last thing I did before I left town, on TV, obviously. And the exasperation that EJ felt calling that game, just begging Mason to jump and begging Oso to, look at the rim and attack the basket and like be in the right places defensively and, and box out. And just another example. I mean, I guess we haven't had a chance to record since that game happened, since it just happened, but they gave up over 20 offensive rebounds. The Hawks had, 16, 17 more field goal attempts. Mm-hmm. I think, obviously, the Suns have been active in trade discussions for quite some time. It's not a coincidence that on the first day that Okogie is eligible to be traded, they trade him for some center help. I'm sure they would have loved to make this trade or a trade 2 weeks ago using Nurkic's contract. They just obviously can't get anyone to bite. And so It's just a little bit funny, and it's a little bit fitting that it happened after such a disastrous performance, I guess, against Atlanta, where, maybe the low point of our center rotation of the entire season, honestly. And there have been a lot of low points to push them to do this.
We should mention, by the way, the Suns also included, with Josh Okogie, all 3 of their tradable second-round picks and received a second-round pick back from Charlotte, which will be the Denver Nuggets second-round pick. It was a situation for the Charlotte where it would either be Denver or Philadelphia.
This June.
So, unless Jokic misses the rest of the season or something, then I think it's going to be Denver's pick because it's going to be the worst of those
This June,
two.
though, don't bury the lead. This means, because the Suns, okay, look, they gave up 3 second-round picks. They're only getting 1 back.
Your confidence they're going to draft somebody makes me feel like you haven't been.
No, I
attention.
have about 3% confidence that they actually use the 50th pick that they're now going to have in this year's draft. But the fact that they even have the opportunity excites me, and of course I'm a masochist, so I'm going to get my hopes up and do my scouting that I always do starting in May. Anyway.
You might not have the chances that pick lasts beyond February 6th, I think, is low.
Entirely possible.
It's
that,
what
that
I'm
it doesn't
saying.
last
So
that
you might
long.
not have
that's
to
fair.
do your scouting at this point because it may not be here in the next few weeks alone. February 6th, of course, is the trade deadline. Important, I think, to note that they got rid of those 3 second-round picks, though they do have 1. That means tradable picks that they have left this current deadline is a single first-round pick and a single second-round pick that they just got back from Charlotte, which they can trade again. But that's important to say because in all iterations of trying to get Bradley Beal, the likelihood of them to get Jimmy Butler for Bradley Beal, the likelihood of them sending Bradley Beal to another team, by all accounts, it seems like they would have to send some sort of assets with him to another team in order to make that possible to facilitate a Jimmy Butler trade. Well, they got rid of 3 of those right now. And Josh Okogie is technically another asset too, but they can't aggregate, but they can attach picks. So it's just something to be said. Gambo on the radio did say they're still in on Jimmy Butler, but look, they have less assets now. I don't know if that makes it more likely. It seems like it makes it less likely to me. But, all reports out of Miami is that they weren't interested in anything the Suns were offering anyway. There's still a few more weeks till the trade deadline. The Suns have less assets now. We'll see what happens.
They have less assets for now, but my friend, this is chess that James Jones is playing. He has simply played his Queen's Gambit opener by acquiring Nick Richards. Just wait until he does what I'm expecting him to do and trades Grayson Allen for 4 protected first-round picks to the Orlando Magic a week from now. Obviously, I'm sort of talking in jest. I do think they have more moves to come. To what extent they're really going to be able to capitalize on this limited asset pool and push further all in is, of course, the question. Because honestly, we should talk about Nick Richards, the player now, but I think it's a little bit difficult to judge this trade, with kind of the 10,000-foot view without knowing what else they're going to do. Because by itself, I think Nick Richards has a lot of positive traits. I think obviously he brings an athleticism that we've been begging for out of the Suns centers for years. There are going to be a lot more dunks. There are going to be more alley-oops. There are going to be more high-flying blocks than we've seen, maybe since we had like a motivated version of DeAndre Ayton, right? Like not the unmotivated version, but certainly more than at any point in the Jusuf Nurkic era. And at the same time, there is a certain extent of it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other type of thing, where either you have the really unathletic lumbering big who's like smart, which has sort of been James Jones's type, or you
it was
find
Nurkic last year, but not this year.
Yeah, and also like the Kaminskis and the Sharches and the types of guys he's acquired in the past, or you finally get a guy who can dunk the ball, but is gonna have some difficulties with the connection, like
a negative assist
stuff.
to turnover ratio.
Yeah, right. So I Nick Richards is an upgrade over what we're playing right now. To be clear, otherwise they wouldn't have had to trade all those second round picks.
He's an upgrade.
I'm a little worried though, only that we're going to be. I'm a little worried about Nick Richards as a starter, especially if this ends up being the only move, and you and you call that going all in.
You're not a contender now. Yeah.
It kind of seems unfair. Like, this is a guy who has started in the past. He was Charlotte's starter last year. They were not a good team, obviously. He's by far at his best as a backup center, not a starting center. And so if you're going to hoist him into that role all of a sudden, like, yeah, there are certain things he's going to do better than Nurkic, obviously, but it feels a little unfair to Nick Richards, the potential expectations that people are going to place upon him now.
And look, it's a weird situation. Not a lot of stability, just even with injuries in Charlotte. Not a team with a ton of expectations. It could be a completely different situation for him where he plays a lot better. But up till this point in his career, Nick Richards, if you just put him compare him to all other starting centers, he would be in the bottom half of those starting centers pretty significantly. That's not to say that he doesn't have skills.
Half. I think it's like clearly fair to say that Nick Richards, if he's your starter, he can be, both things can be true. He can be an upgrade over what we've got going on right now and still clearly a bottom 3 or 4 starting center in the league, which I think he is.
Yeah. I mean, let's go over some stats because I have some. I'm sure you looked some up too, and I just want to try to really figure out who he is. So let's start with defense. He can't switch, right? So he's definitely going to be in the drop. He's not a player that's going to be very capable of getting out on the perimeter and chasing guys. The way Oso has actually done a good job so far this season. It's not Nick Richards. He's a lot bigger. Like, you start there. He's bigger, longer, a little slower footed, but not slow, especially in a straight line. He's very fast in a straight line. Opponents this current season are shooting about 6% worse within 6 feet of the rim when Nick Richards is the primary defender. For comparison's sake, Nurkic was better than that. About 7.5% worse when Nurkic is the primary defender. But for more comparison's sake, Mason was 1% and Oso was 1.4%. So, much better in the restricted area if he's the primary defender than Mason, who can't jump, and Oso, who's not tall.
Who can jump, but not high enough.
The arms aren't long, in his case, whereas with Nick Richards, taller, more athletic, longer arms, so at the rim he's able to contest. Not as big, not as strong, not as wide as Nurkic, which I think, Nurkic, for all of his faults, does a pretty good job when he's the primary defender within the restricted area. So he's not quite what Nurkic was, but he's he's capable within that area at affecting shots just by being big and being long. It has to be a drop. Now the question will be, with the infrastructure that the Suns are going to be able to put around him so far in this upcoming stretch, will he be better in the drop than he was in Charlotte? Because Charlotte doesn't have a ton of perimeter defense. The Suns have done, I think, a better job perimeter defense lately now that they've sort of switched up the lineups and done a better job of playing Ryan Dunmore. Now, could that help him? I'm hoping it will.
We'll see how that holds up without Josh Okogie, because I do think Josh Okogie obviously is a part of our perimeter defense if it's made any improvements at all. We should mention he's going to start according to Gambo, by the way. That's kind of expected. He's probably the best center on the roster right now. He's clearly better than Mason. He's clearly better than Oso, although Oso does flash, some nice.
Oso is
spots.
probably a little more basketball skilled as far as finding, but scoring wise and jumping at the rim, it's not close. It's just not close.
Just really briefly, by the way, they've acquired a center. It doesn't mean they're done with that position, and I think we should, make that evident, because they could still be chasing Jimmy Butler. They could still be chasing a bunch of wing depth or different guys at the deadline. They also don't have to be satisfied with Nick Richards, Mason Plumlee, and Oso Agudaro as their center rotation for the rest of the season. They might still be interested in Duop Reith. I have absolutely no insider information about that. It's just they still don't have the center who can shoot threes, which we all know is kind of something that I think in his heart of hearts Bud covets. But obviously with the rotation they have right now, Nick is the starter.
If the Heat just refuse to give Jimmy Butler up, and you've already negotiated potential Bradley Beal trades, and one of those includes a center that could start, it's not the worst idea to look at that either. Sure. Especially if you have the idea of potentially adding Jimmy Butler later if he signs an extension. Maybe having players that aren't on a no-trade clause would help you to negotiate that in the future, say in the offseason.
And Of course, we need to mention that Nick Richards is not an expiring contract. That's, I think,
Yeah.
relevant compared to some of the deals, some of the types of deadline deals that they've made in the past. Getting guys like Torrey Craig, who then enters free agency. Getting Royce O'Neal, who's about to enter free agency, and you need to re-sign him. Nick Richards is on a very team-friendly $5 million contract next season as well. You know, he's already 27 years old. This is not to say that, like, you're going to make a massive 5, 6, 7-year future investment into Nick Richards, but for chemistry purposes, for continuity purposes, it helps to have a guy who you think maybe could just stick around and be your backup center next year, and you bring in someone else to be the starter. So, you know, there's that small modicum of investment that they're putting into this guy as a future piece.
The Suns are going to look different with him playing on the floor, and it's not just because he's a different type of player than those guys that he's going to be stepping in for. It's because the skill set is so dramatically different that they are going to have to slightly change how they play a little bit, because right now what we've seen a lot from the Suns is this sort of hub elbow center like Nurkic, like Oso, like Šarić in the past, like Frank Kaminsky in the past. A lot of stuff that's worked well with Devin Booker and players who like to shoot mid-range shots where you set a screen and allow them space in the mid-range to work, and maybe don't roll right away. Maybe give them time so you can reset, change the angle of the screen to give them more opportunities to do different things in the mid-range. It's not going to be like that. I think he's going to likely screen and then roll, and then roll, and then roll, and then roll, and then roll. And that's something he's going to have to be willing to do on this team. But outside of that, because he's not going to be a great player in the short roll, because if Booker is out there, and all of a sudden Nick Richards comes up to screen and Booker has two defenders in his face, if he tosses it to Nick in the middle of the floor, he's got room to get to the rim. He's going to get to the rim, right? He will dunk. But if they cut off his line drive to the rim and they're able to X out properly, that could be a turnover a lot more than it is now. And that includes with Nurkic. So that means when it's a Booker screen and roll or a KD screen and roll, somebody else is going to have to set a lot of those screens.
Absolutely,
he's going to have to be stashed in the dunker spot. We're going to see more Ryan Dunn setting screens. We're going to see more Devin Booker setting screens for KD. We're going to see more KD setting screens for Devin Booker just by necessity. But if it's Tyus Jones, who they're not going to double and is pretty fast and pretty good at passing those lobs, that's going to be Nick Richards setting that screen a little bit more, because he has the ability of providing that lane and allowing Tyus to have a lob partner, somebody who can actually catch it above the rim. And, you know, that means for somebody like Ryan Dunn, who's been catching it in the short roll all season, he's going to have to learn how to lob that. I'm not sure if he did that in college.
I don't think, I'm not sure he's done it once yet this season. I can't remember.
Who would he do it to? You know,
yeah,
like,
no, it's a good point.
Oso, maybe, I guess once, maybe, but like he's going to have to learn to do that, because as soon as that defense comes off on him to stop that floater, that's going to have to be a lob directly to Nick Richards, and I would love to see that. Like, that's not a bad thing. But, you know, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, I think, for these guys to learn how to play together. Somebody who has a completely different skill set than any center that they've really had in a long time.
With Ryan in particular, I think it's a good point, because we were just praising him on the last pod as a guy who's been increasingly playing in the pick and roll. A lot of that has been out of necessity, because I think they've realized Ryan actually has the athleticism to finish those plays in a way that, say, Nurkic or even Oso haven't always displayed this season. But yeah, all of these wings are, like, not just Ryan, all of them, I think, are going to play a bit more of a role. We've seen Grayson setting screens. He can catch in the middle of the floor. I know you don't love him as a playmaker, but I think he's more capable of doing it than Nick Richards.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
You know, a little bit. Yeah. So a little bit of Grayson, a little bit of Royce, definitely a lot of Ryan Dunn, though. I think you're going to see him setting those screens, catching in the short roll if he has to, and then Nick can be situated, as you said, in the dunker spot, just ready to be the finisher. And
he's a good cutter. You know, he has good timing on that. It's something that he's capable of doing. He's fast. In a straight line, he's fast. So, like, if he's a little bit outside of the paint, he can get there with good timing. He has pretty good hands. You know, like, I watched all of his turnovers, not to be a sicko here, but I watched all of his turnovers this year.
I definitely did not do that. I know Charlotte's fans' main criticism of him offensively is his hands.
And there's some elements of playing with LaMelo Ball, you know, you just never know when the pass is coming. You know, they have a passer that's just well beyond anything that the Suns have. But, I watched a lot of his turnovers. More of them were on screens than on missed catches. You know what I mean? Like, more of them were for screens that were a little bit late or a little bit mistimed, a little bit early, causing a turnover than just, throwing the ball out of bounds or dropping a pass that was dropped to him right at the rim. I do think that Dunks is like...
can he catch a bounce pass? I'm curious.
I'd like to see, because I didn't see a ton of that I watched some offensive highlights.
It's just funny because that was always the last time we had an athletic rim running big, DeAndre Ayton. That was always one of our biggest criticisms of him too. Ayton actually had incredible hands, but he didn't have the flexibility to bend over and catch a bounce pass. Now, in fairness, if you're a guard throwing a bounce pass to a big, a lot of times you just need to not do it because you should know them better than that. I'm just curious if Nick Richards has a little bit more of the ability to catch a variety of different types of passes.
Well, how's this for maybe one of the complaints on on his hands? Right now he's shooting 76% at the rim. 43% on layups this season.
What?
That's what he's shooting. 43% on layups.
So 76% at the. So you're saying 76% if he just dunks it, right?
He has to dunk it essentially to finish.
Okay.
So
he
far,
doesn't
season.
have any touch, basically.
He doesn't have touch, and that's his hands too, right? So yeah, I was looking at that, and it's his lowest since his rookie year. What he's shooting at the rim in layups, specific to layups this season. And that's pretty weird, right? I mean, just to be that poor on layups so far this year, but obviously capable of getting up above the rim and dunking it. But there will be times where he needs a little bit of touch. There's no posting him up, right? There's no on switches. There's no posting him up. You're going to try to get him to lob on those switches.
Yeah, absolutely not. He is not a guy who gets that post up privileges. Even Nurkic, it infuriated me every time they tried to give him post up privileges. But Nick Richards, you don't get that. No
grenades. No throwing him a grenade, right? The shot clock's got 5 seconds left. Devin Booker, Tyus Jones, Kevin Durant, make him try to get the offensive rebound in that case. Don't give him the grenade and then know that it's just going the other way as soon as he goes up. Try to shoot it and see if he can get the offensive rebound and keep the possession alive, because he's just not someone that can create for himself. He needs somebody to create for him. There's a lot of limitation to his scoring. Like, ultimately, that's what it is, right? He doesn't have a ton of drive game. He has some, to be honest, because he's fast in a straight line, but some. Can't really post up, can't create for himself, but the extent to which he can get above the rim and dunk, the extent to which you could throw it to him outside of the restricted area and he can still dunk, is beyond anything that we've had on the Suns. And I don't know, when was the last time they've had a guy like that? Like, it's been pretty long. JaVale, that's a great one.
If you're not saying, motivated Ayton, who appeared, in spurts, it was, which season was the JaVale season? 20?
Those would be layups anyway,
21, 22?
Yeah. JaVale was pretty good there, yeah.
And before JaVale, Rashawn Holmes.
And he was 34 or whatever,
Right, yeah. Well, JaVale's athleticism lasted longer, in his knees for whatever. He had more bounce than Mason at that age.
There was a time about a few days ago where I was looking up JaVale to see what he was doing. That's how dire. That's how dire it got here.
Yeah, the very first stat I pulled and I posted about it is that Nick Richards last year, I'm using last year just because it's the full season stat or sample size, he had 120 dunks last year. 120 dunks. Yusuf Nurkic had 56.
He has more dunks this season than Nurkic and Plumlee combined.
And he did.
This is him coming off the bench
last season as well.
Yeah, it's just Oso has 25 just for the numbers. Nurk and Plumlee combined is 27, and Nick Richards has 28 this year, which is, mind you, not a high number, but he is coming off the bench playing less minutes. Mark
there
Williams,
are certainly guys
clearly a better center than him.
There are certainly guys who dunk it more than Nick Richards, but the bar is in hell. That's what we're comparing it to. And we just haven't had a guy like this in a long time. So I am sure that Book and KD are excited about this move.
I think so too. And it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust their play style here, because they can't work off of him as a hub. He still will do those handoffs, but it can't be in the same way
what it means?
That it was with Nurkic.
You know what it means? And I never mind this. It encourages them to play fast, right? You guys have a guy who can run, fill the lane correctly, and get end to end. Not like a blur or anything. Again, he's not the fastest center in the league, but Nick Richards will run in transition, and you can reward him if you play fast. If you don't play fast, you're not using him properly. you know?
Yeah.
And you're only hurting yourself if you're Book or KD and
Yeah,
just slowing
'cause,
the
yeah.
offense down over and over again.
Yeah, if he's running down there and he's got a mismatch, you can't just dump it down to him. You got to get there fast enough to throw him a lob. Essentially, that's how you're going to score in that case. He and defensively, I'll mention it again, not much of a switchable defender. Will have to play in the drop. It'll be one of those situations where it's like, how much can Bud help him? Because Bud has a reputation as somebody who's helped a lot of players in the drop in the past. How much can Bud make him a better defender in the drop? And how capable are the rest of the roster to make it easier on him and funnel the types of guys that they need to into him so that he has the opportunity to try to get those blocks or those rebounds. He's a limited player. Like, this is, like you said, this is not the move that makes him a contender.
No,
He
not
is a
even
limited
close.
player, but like he still is in many ways more capable than some of the guys that they have on the roster at center. Different ways than those guys are capable. Like in a way, what Oso is good at is all the things that Nick Richards is bad at. You know, like that's kind of the way that they mirror each other in a way, and it could be interesting to see them change up their play style
Except
when
for
each
shooting,
of those guys
of
are on
course.
the floor.
You know,
Yeah,
that's
they
that's
both
the
can't shoot. That's
the
true.
unfortunate thing is that they can't play together, obviously, because neither of them shoots. But otherwise, they mirror each other's skill sets so well, and that's why I brought up Duop Reith again earlier. It's like, man, if you could just get one guy who shoots, it does make you a lot more interesting. Also, one stat I looked at: Nick Richards, career 73% free throw shooter, and he kind of gets there a lot. Did you notice that too?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Good free throw rate. A guy who embraces contact. Again, don't run the offense through him, but if he's gonna like miss the layup but get fouled, I don't mind that necessarily, because he has shown an ability to actually get to the free throw line and make those shots a lot more than, you know, even Nurkic, who I think is a decent free throw shooter, not good, but decent. Or the other guys on the roster. You know, Mason has had a lot of free throw struggles throughout his career. Oso has had struggles, I think, both making free throws and even embracing contact to get there in the first place. So, like Nick Richards, he's had 5 free throw attempts per 36 for his entire career. That's good for a low usage big.
Let's talk about Josh Okogie.
It's a bummer.
It is a bummer, man. It's just a bummer, and it was very anticipated. The contract was signed in a way that we knew he was going to be traded. It's just that I think that the way that this team has played so far this season and the complete lack of dogs on the roster, it really highlighted what Josh Okogie can bring to a team. And, you know, as bad and as frustrating as he can be sometimes, this was actually a year where he was mostly a net positive every time he checked in. And, you know, he only played if there was injuries, really. He couldn't get onto the court. And look, you're going to play him over Royce? No. You're not going to play him over Royce. So it's not his fault that he can't get into the lineup in that way. But he only played when there was injuries. And when he came onto the floor, all heart, all the time. In there, getting offensive rebounds, getting up into guys' space. You know, like, for a guy who doesn't play much, he's got a lot of highlights. I was looking at some of my old tweets of him.
So many highlights. Some of
The
our best
Jalen Green
highlights
ones
of the past
The
5
Jalen
years.
Green one's insane.
Yeah.
You know, the Paolo blocked game-winning shot, that's
Yeah,
insane.
Yeah. Josh is... how many players are in the NBA? Like 300? There's 30
Yeah,
teams,
something like
15.
that. Or
There's
400 or something,
450 players in the NBA. I think you'd struggle to name more than 10 with a better motor than Josh Okogie.
Yeah.
He's in the top 10 motors in the NBA. I honestly think so. And that's a difficult thing to list out, but it's like, clearly he doesn't have all the skills. Clearly his ceiling is capped by being a guy who's 6'4" and whatever. But he is just such a joy, a pleasure to watch, a guy who you know is never, ever, ever going to take a possession off. I think it's going to be really interesting in Charlotte for him because, you know, they have some guys on the wing. I know Josh Green is there, but I don't think that's exactly working out like they wanted. So I think there's some real opportunity for Josh to play in Charlotte. And he's shooting 38% from deep this year for the Suns on a low sample size. I don't think that's real, but I would be curious to see if Josh can land himself a consistent 20-minute per game role in Charlotte, which I don't think is impossible.
No, not at all. I
He
mean,
could-
they
he
play
could-
fast too, which I think he'll benefit from.
It would not shock me if like he's such a hard worker. That's really what it is. It would not shock me if by season's end we're looking at Josh Okogie's stats and he's playing way more minutes on Charlotte and he's got like a 35% 3-point percentage and he's only taking the wide open
You'll
ones.
never give up on that. I appreciate that.
He's at 38. He's at 38
I know,
right now.
but he's pretty wide open on the Suns, and he's not playing a lot. So it's hard to really. Well, here's what I think.
I'm going to root for him so hard.
Of
regardless.
course, I think that the hardcore Charlotte fans, the ones that watch the beginning and to the end of every game, regardless of 9 wins, right? The ones that really stick through the thick and thin, they're going to love Josh Okogie. They're going to be the ones that are saying, wow, the Hornets are down by 20 and Josh Okogie's out there fighting on every possession. And, that's the kind of player that fans love. The ones who, I don't want to say that the other players don't care as much, but like it's hard to say they care. It's hard to say they care more than him.
They literally
They
do
definitely
not.
don't care more than him. That's for sure.
98% of NBA players literally do not care as much as Josh Okogie when they step on the court, because if they did, they would get to the ball first. They would make the hustle plays that he constantly makes, and they just can't. And as for Charlotte fans, if there's any fan base that's used to just rooting for teams that are down by 20 points, they've rooted for a lot of teams that are consistently down by 20 points and led by dumb players, like players who are dumb as rocks with negative basketball IQ. I think it'll be good for them, diehards or casuals alike, to root for a player where they might still be down by 20 points. But you know what? They're going to have fun because it's going to be a player who makes impactful plays and who cares every time down the court.
Absolutely. I have enjoyed watching Josh Okogie. It was the type of player where the more he played on the Suns, the more I enjoyed it. Where at first it was just a little frustrating to watch a guy who just can't really score at all. They're passing it to him, and he doesn't need to be guarded. But the more you watch him, the more you appreciate everything he did. It's just really fun to watch on the Suns, and somebody that if he comes back to the Suns in a few years or something, everyone will be grateful. Because he's not going to play a huge role on any team that's trying to win, because that's just not what you do. Is you need guys who can play both sides of the floor. But he will be someone who gives it his all, and he'll be missed. I'll miss him here on the Suns. Shout out, by the way, to that fan that named their kid after Josh Okogie just a few weeks ago. He signed something for them for the baby and said, please name the kid Josh. And then they did. And then he was traded. By the way, what a curse on that one. But look, you still named your kid, your son, after a really cool player.
2 things. A lot of people, when asked who's the funny guy in the locker room for the Suns, say it's Josh Okogie. I think that took us off guard a little bit at first because Josh, with the media, is quite a media-trained guy. He doesn't necessarily always show that personality, show that side of him. But at the same time, I believe it. You see the camera angles during the broadcast, the way he jokes around with the rest of the guys. I think that's a loss for the team chemistry. I don't know how funny Nick Richards is. By the way, Nick Richards, born in Kingston, Jamaica. He's Jamaican. I didn't know if you knew that, Mike.
I did. Well, I found out today.
Yeah, I feel like that's not common knowledge. I just think it's cool because we were literally saying the other day, like, what international players do we have on the Suns? We don't really have any other than Nurkic. Now we have a guy from Jamaica. He did move to New York City. I watched some interviews with him. He moved to New York City as a high schooler. And because of that, if you watch like Nick Richards talk these days, it's kind of funny because he's lost like 80 to 90% of his Jamaican accent, but it's still kind of there. It comes out in little spurts, little words or phrases, which is just kind of fun. I forget what I was saying about Josh, though.
Well, let me tell you this, though. I'll mention this. One of the things I do when the Suns get a new player, look for their nicknames. He doesn't have any. There's none listed. There's none listed on Basketball Reference.
It's respectfully, from one boring name to another. My name is Sam Cooper. I'm talking to Nick Richards. We need to amend that. We need to come up with something. It's kind of crazy that he's been in the league for 5 years and doesn't have a single
27,
listed nickname on Basketball Reference. Does Josh have any? Come to think of it,
that's a great question. Probably nonstop, right? I mean, that's
nonstop.
Call me nonstop. That's his good old handle. Let's see if he has any other ones.
Obi-Wan Okogie, which I think no one has ever called him.
It's good though.
Okay.
I'm sure there's been an announcer out there that's done it. Right? Like somebody has done that.
Everyone just called him J.O., which I know is boring, but it worked.
I mean, that's a nickname too. I guess that counts. We'll see if Nick Richards. It's up to EJ, I think, at this point, or maybe Charles Barkley if he gains interest in the Suns again. They got a new player, Sam. They did it. They made a move. They made a trade. They're trying to stop the bleeding, if you will. They're trying to see if something can be done by changing it up, giving them someone with a little bit of a different skill set. And hopefully they can figure it out defensively a little bit too, because I think that's where the Suns have really been struggling. Rebounding, by the way, has been a massive problem, and they got a big giant guy who can get rebounds now, so that could be a big help for the Suns as well. The athletic guys aren't going to have the athletic advantage completely over Nick Richards the way they do over Oso Ighodaro and Mason Plumlee.
I did remember the last thing I wanted to say about Josh that I forgot earlier. Mm-hmm. The Hustle Player of the Week the year. The Hustle Player of the what's it called? The Timeline.
The Timeline's Dan Marley Hustle Player of the Year of the Week.
Okay, thank you. We've been doing that every week on our Patreon feed for those who don't know.
We're trying to track every week and give Hustle Player awards on the Patreon podcast every week, and then tracking who wins every week to see if it matches who the Suns give the award to at the end of the year.
Yeah, also just because it gives us a good excuse to like highlight a role player each week, more or less. That's what it ends up being. The leader so far this season was Josh Okogie. He already has won 3 weeks. Nobody else has more than one, I think. We started a little bit late, a few weeks into the season. And now he's gone. So someone's going to have to catch up to him and overtake him. And I think
it's pretty obvious, right?
I think it's pretty obvious that person is going to be Ryan Dunn. I think the race became a little less interesting now, but you never know.
I think Royce O'Neal gets some credit here as the other guy who can do it. You know what I would love? Is if it was Nick Richards. That would really be excellent for the Suns. If they found a big that was willing to be a hustle player, that would be really good for the Suns. But right now, it's definitely the odds. If you were to make odds, it's Ryan Dunn's award to lose, I think, at this point, and it's up to him to find a way to get that. But Josh Okogie, like it came down to a point where I think I told you on the Patreon podcast, our weekly award is whether or not Josh Okogie plays minutes, because that's how hard he works, and he was always out there doing it. Shout out Josh. He gets the 3-week award at least for his time here with the Suns. Looking forward to watching Nick Richards. I haven't seen it, but have we gotten any indication of when he's going to play? It doesn't seem like it's going to be Washington, right?
No, there's no way it's going to be against Washington. I would assume not before this weekend at the very earliest. So hopefully they can take care of the what's their record, 6-32 or something?
Yeah.
The Washington
with
Wizards
no Brad,
tomorrow?
by the way. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Brad's doubtful, but probably not going to play. That ankle roll by Brad was pretty bad.
No Brad and no rebounding, but honestly, at a certain point, you just have to take a stand and say, if you can't beat the Washington Wizards on the road, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to put it out there because I'm afraid they can't do it.
What
Hopefully
if they lost
can
that
do
one
it.
and beat Cleveland? How would you feel after that?
That makes more sense with what I know about this team, is that part of me feels like, they could go up against any contender or they could play any shorthanded garbage team in the league, and they're always
going to be the same game no matter what.
It's always going to be within 5 points in the fourth quarter.
Shout out Josh Okogie. Thank you for your time here in Phoenix. Welcome to the Suns, Nick Richards. We'll talk about you a lot on this podcast going forward. Sam, you got anything else before we go?
I think we'll leave it there.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.